in a bizarre interlude that's about to end. And I feel very lucky that I've had a chance to live through this moment in history. And I've been able to reaffirm all of my values, strengthen all of my values, actually, as a result of this period. And for that, I'm grateful. I'm feeling very positive about 2026. I think this is going to be a very, very good year. And I want people to understand that. Don't lose hope. Do not lose hope.
Welcome to the East Anchorage Book Club. I'm your host, Andrew Gray. The purpose of this podcast is to tell the stories of Alaskans of interest and importance. Today, our guest is Elstun Lauesen. Elstun grew up in Alaska, and after dropping out of the University of Alaska Fairbanks in 1970, he managed former Alaska State Senator Josephson's campaign for the U.S. Senate to replace Bob Bartlett, who had died in office. Ultimately, Joe lost the Democratic primary to Wendell Kay, and Republican Ted Stevens won that seat. After time at Harvard University, where Elstun lived in constitutional law professor Laurence Tribe's basement, Elstun returned to Alaska, where he made a career in rural economic development. We discussed some of his projects on St. Lawrence Island off the coast of western Alaska. Elstun is known to many listeners as a progressive firebrand. He and his wife of 21 years, former Alaska State House Representative Harriet Drummond, have been at the heart of Alaska Democratic circles for decades. Elstun has a pulmonary disorder that requires him to use supplemental oxygen and can make extended conversation challenging. I'm so grateful that he agreed and was able to do this interview. Elstun Lauesen, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you. It's an honor and a privilege.
Where were you born and where did you grow up?
I was born in Yorkville, Illinois, and I grew up in Anchorage, McKinley, North Pole, Fairbanks, back to Anchorage, again, Alaska.
What did your parents do?
My father was an engineer. He was the chief of engineering for the 5010th CEG, which is the SAC command on Eielson Air Force Base. And my mother owned and ran restaurants. And my father was also a real estate developer.
Was it your dad's involvement with the military that caused you guys to move around so much?
Not really. Once we were associated with Eielson, we were pretty stable, in fact. It was the military that created stability. I think my father, quite frankly, was a spy. That's not a joke. I think the guy was twisted, man. I mean that in a talented sense. He was very involved in information and had many mysterious meetings, and his purpose and function and whereabouts in his vocation was very sketchy. So.
And you just, before we started, I told you that I had some anxiety about saying your last name. I learned to say Lauesen.
Yes.
And you told me about playing with a little boy in Esther when you were young, who was from Denmark.
Yes. A Danish family moved into Esther when I was living there. He would play with a ball and bat, and I would go out and play with him. And he would call me Lauesen, which was a Danish pun, because Louisa means fleas. And so in essence, what he was calling me was a flea-ridden man.
So he thought he was very funny.
He thought he was funny. I thought it was kind of funny the first 20 times he did it.
Where's your dad's family from? Where does Lauesen come from?
Someplace in Denmark, I don't know here.
Gotcha.
My mother was an enrolled member of the Lac du Flambeau Chippewa Reservation. So I get my Native American identity through her family. But my father was a Dane, Scandinavian, so I get that identity through his family. And neither sets of grandparents were involved in my life.
Was your mom involved in her Native American heritage at all?
Not really. She was involved in the struggles of an entrepreneur in Alaska. But I have nieces and nephews who are very, very involved in the tribe politics. Yeah, I could tell you a thing or three about that.
So where'd you graduate from high school? Sorry.
I have to apologize. I have a interstitial pulmonary problem that causes me to have difficulty breathing. And yeah, it makes conversation a little bit challenging.
Well, let me know if you need a break. You're doing great. Where did you graduate from high school?
Lathrop High School.
Oh, in Fairbanks. And then did you go...
1963.
Graduated in 1953, and did you go straight to college?
I did go straight to college, and then I dropped out and worked a little bit and took a trip to visit my friends in the following fall in East Coast, in New York, where they were all going to school, and including Michael Carey. And so I traveled and came back, went back to school, and for a couple of semesters, dropped out.
You were at University of Alaska Fairbanks?
Yes. And 1970, a friend named John Ave Lalaman had arranged for me to be enrolled in a special program that was set up for Native American students. It was Harvard University, and they were experimenting with a new set of programs to give underserved groups an opportunity to do things. And I enrolled in that, and I was moved to Boston for a couple of years to participate in that program. And then I dropped out of that. I fell in love, dropped out of school, and then went traveling around Europe to pursue heart salt mysteries. And
well, I know in this period you did something else, because you ran Joe Josephson's campaign for the U.S. Senate.
Oh, yeah.
When he was running against Wendell Kay, who ultimately was the Democratic candidate who ran against Ted Stevens. In Ted Stevens' first official campaign, he had been appointed previously to that Senate seat
by Wally Hickle
when Bob Bartlett had died.
Bob Bartlett was in the Senate. Ralph Rivers was in the House, and Ernest Greening was in the Senate. And Bob Bartlett, well known to my parents, Bob Bartlett was a man known for his amazing memory of people's names. I saw him actually do this. He could walk through a crowd and say, "Hey, Jake, hey, John, hey, Frank, hey, John here. How's your wife, Alicia? How's your wife?" I mean, the guy had an amazing political gift. Insofar as that is a political gift. He just simply had a gift.
And to put it in perspective for folks, so Joe Josephson had worked for Bob Bartlett. That's what brought Joe Josephson to Alaska, is that he had worked for Bob Bartlett when Bob Bartlett was the delegate for Alaska prior to statehood. And so in a way, it's like he had a right to run for that seat because he had a strong connection with Bob Bartlett from working for him for years.
Well, yes.
And I've had Joe Josephson on, but I mean, he also was on Anchorage City Council. He served as vice mayor. Like, he'd gotten really involved in local politics before that race. So he had set himself up as a possible candidate.
Oh, yeah. He was, in many ways, a logical successor to Bob Bartlett. He was recognized for his strength as a candidate in Anchorage. And so there was another candidate that was being supported by the Republicans. That was Wendell Kay.
So So Ted Stevens was ultimately going to be the Republican nominee, but there were Republicans that were supporting Wendell Kay.
There were Republicans that were supporting Wendell Kay to run against Joe.
Got it.
And
Is it because they thought that Joe was going to be a stronger competitor?
they thought that Joe would have the support of the Bartlett team, and which had
Power.
a deep pocket into the Democratic Party and nationally as well. And so they were interested in creating a competition in the Democratic side.
Got it.
A trick not unknown to us.
Oh, yeah.
In current times.
And Wendell Kay was handsome. He was called like the Silver Fox or something like that. And he was...
Oh, he was a very attractive candidate in a way. I liked him. But...
and you ran the campaign in Fairbanks for Joe Josephson.
Yes. We were actually hired to replace the guy who had been originally hired to run Joe Josephson's campaign, Michael and I.
Michael Carey, who was a journalist at the ADN for a long time, but he was in Fairbanks with you at the time.
With the Josephson campaign.
Got it.
As good replacements for the guy they had to fire because we were young.
Yep.
And could connect with younger voters, which was the target.
So the story was that there was some anti-Semitism in the campaign.
Well, there absolutely was.
And that in particular, it might have been an event in Fairbanks where there had been particularly egregious anti-Semitism.
Oh, yeah. The story is Joe was there invited as a herd of politicians to address a morning meeting of the Chamber of Commerce. They have, those ridiculous 7 o'clock in the morning meetings. You should go to a meeting before you go to work. Mm-hmm. What the hell does that? Anyway, the Chamber of Commerce does. So, the meeting, we had to be there. And after the meeting, we're coming out, and the John Birch Society was having a meeting in another smaller meeting room, and they all came out, and of course Michael and I were local kids. We knew everybody, and I realized that these are the guys who were putting swastikas on all of Joe's signs, and so I went back to Joe and I said, man, stay away from these guys. These are the ones who are putting swastikas on your signs. And Joe got this little impish look on his face. And he says, what do you mean stay away from them? He said, they deserve to meet their candidate as well. And he goes up and I'm going, oh my God. And so it was the first campaign experience I had where I thought, let's see, do I really have to take a bullet? I ran up. And Michael and I were sort of standing on either side to protect him, but he was fine. He was great. He's a great meter of people, and they liked him. So it was a very positive event, and it taught me a great deal about politics.
Mm-hmm.
That differences are very thin.
So did you meet your first wife? Is that what had happened? And that's who you were traveling around Europe with? Because you said you'd fallen in love.
Oh, back in that part of my life, I was falling in love all the time. I once had a friend who said, Elstun, your problem isn't that you love too much, but you love too well. And that was certainly the case. I was chasing after my muse. I fancied myself a poet and a writer. And so that was that.
So you traveled around Europe for a few years. Do you have any stories from that period?
I actually have a great story. I was hitchhiking across Morocco, going east to west rather than west to east, wearing my jalaba, looking very Moroccan. And, I think I was in Taza, and it was the sunset. And the sunset, they have measurement singers. And it was just gorgeous. And there were just an army of young men and older men holding hands and walking along. And I'm walking along with the crowd, just enjoying the evening, listening to the music. And there was just a beautiful ambiance of the place. And I said, okay, God, I said, show me a sign. I'm tired of waiting for this, your arrogance of silence. I demand to know right now. Show me a sign to prove that you're real. I was making my demand to prove. And all of a sudden, I fell into a hole. And I hit the bottom of the hole, and the top of my head came just above the top of the hole. So it was about 6 feet deep. And the stench was horrible. And I realized, oh my God. And it was then I saw little ribbons and things. Oh my God, this is where they would shit in the course of the construction day, right? And I'm going, And in order to be able to breathe, I had to pull my head back. And I looked straight up in the sky, and a meteor went. And I went, message delivered. And got on to that. That's just those are the kinds of experiences I had. So it was a pursuit of knowledge.
So did you come back to Alaska after your time in Europe?
I did. I got homesick. I missed my folks and family. So I came back.
You come back to Fairbanks?
I hitchhiked. I got driven by my pals to and the new love of my life. And dropped off I forget where they dropped me off. But anyway, I went into Canada and hitchhiked across Canada. I used the J Treaty. It was back in the days when you could do that. I showed them my identity as the son of a Chippewa enrolled member, and I could invoke the J Treaty to get access across the border. And I did it. And I hitchhiked to Alaska. My last ride was a truck was pulling into Sourdough Roadhouse, which my parents owned, and in Gakona Junction. Okay? Pulled into it and walked into the lodge, and there was my niece, Perry, sitting there at the lodge. She saw me and went, Uncle Florence. And then my dad came stumbling out of the back. Butch, my God. And then my mother was in tears. But I was home.
So it was before the period where you could call your parents every day, so they hadn't heard from you in a while.
Yeah.
No expecting that you were going to show up that day.
No.
And that was, I assume, in the mid-70s?
Yeah. I would say 1973.
Okay, so what's happened for the last 52 years?
That's a good question. I was hoping you'd be able to tell me that. I have been a economic development finance a guy who puts together financial packages for mostly rural development projects. And the exciting time I've had with working in economic development in Indian country and in rural Alaska is accounts for a great deal of that content. And as I used to say to workshops, when I would give a workshop, I would say economic development is a lot like two elephants making love. There's a lot of snorting, a lot of dust being raised, a lot of thumping on the ground, and then nothing happens for about 2 years, and then the project appears. And the thing I learned about economic development is successful economic development depends on the orchestration of various interests that are involved in a particular project. And so you wind up finding that economic development becomes social development, community development. And you wind up counseling people. Literally, I had people in tears dealing with personal tragedies and work through those to make sure that the stakeholder interests represented were still intact. It sounds terribly crass, but in fact, it, in the end, worked out well for them and shareholders. But yes, the human story that unfolds in the course of doing an economic development project is an amazing thing. And it's going to be the subject of a book that I'm writing.
What's the book that you're writing?
The book that I'm writing is my experience as a rural development specialist.
Well, what are a couple of the projects that you're most proud?
Well, a good example is on St. Lawrence Island. I was on St. Lawrence Island for a couple of reasons, and a non-associated thing that I discovered was the macroalgae that was washing up on shore. And the thing about the shores of St. Lawrence Island is it's not sand. It's like gravel that you would put in an aquarium. It's like aquarium gravel, very fine gravel. And it's perfectly suited for the laying out of the vegetation that is washed up. And it lies there and dries, and the people from St. Lawrence Island go and harvest it. And I went, God, there really needs to be something. And we had a researcher who was busy trying to find markets because we wanted to have all the opportunities. There was an algorithm, so to speak, for defining the opportunities that existed in a rural area. So you utilize local resources to the maximum extent feasible. Utilize local skills to the maximum extent feasible. Try to generate a value-added product and generate new revenues coming into the microeconomy of that village. And it doesn't matter how small the village is, that there is a microeconomy, and that the more revenue you can bring in, and then you can diversify, like having 5 or 6 people with licenses to do hair and cosmetics and things like that. So then people can get a hair wash once a week, and it improves quality of life. And you can have a restaurant, which is basically a restaurant on wheels that you fly into the village, and then all of a sudden, during 6 months out of the village, there's resources that are being produced and sold, and jobs being created. The full development of the local economy is the goal, and it requires almost a mental health pursuit. You can do this. You can. There is no limit. You're only limited by your imagination. We'll figure it out. We will make it happen. And we, by God, made it happen. And let me give you an example.
Well, I was going to ask about the algae. Did y'all do something with the algae?
So we did. The algae is utilized as an emulsifier for everything from medicine to food. And there are intermediate companies that are in the market for macroalgae that they can utilize for that purpose. The macroalgae that I had reprogrammed, $150,000 that we had in a reserve account for hiring the University of Alaska Southeast to do a macroalgae survey of St. Lawrence Island. And they came on and did it. Michelle Ridgway ran. She was a 24-year-old at the time, graduate student, just fucking great, just a tremendous human being. And she wound up dying in a car accident. But anyway, she went there, ran a team. They came up with this great scope of statement and the scope of availability of macroalgae in St. Lawrence Island. And so that was one of the deliverables. And that deliverable made available as a white paper to a number of companies that were in the business of producing intermediate product for medicinal and food. Okay. Anyway, these companies, we sent the white papers, sent samples, and we got huge response from particularly Canadians for some reason. They seemed very interested in what we had. And so we went ahead and developed that market. And we created the St. Lawrence Island Economic Development Corporation to basically foster it, manage the interests, and make sure that it was followed through. A lot of very bright folks there to manage the operation of the thing, and so we did that, and just as we were about to get our first order, the CDQ thing happened, community development quota, and the CDQ for St. Lawrence Island was a shellfish CDQ that came in with a lot of money, a lot of outside interests, and they said, "Oh, you've already got an organization set up." So they took it over, and they ran the CDQ out of the organization that I built, basically. But that was the second deliverable, was that organization. Third deliverable was the interest, the market interest that we established with these different companies. So if they ever wanted to go back and do that kind of thing again, they could. But, I mean, Jesus, just been 40 years. And then we went a pair of villages near them on the mainland.
They're known. Stebbins and St. Michael.
One of the things that we have up there, I have up there, is a plan for deer. And so we took on the deer issue. The deer from St. Lawrence Island, the way St. Lawrence Island became populated was, and we learned this after Glasnost, where the ancestors, the Siberian Yupiks, were chasing a bunch of deer, and they went running out onto the ocean, and which happened to be solid enough for them to make it to St. Lawrence Island. And before it was St. Lawrence Island. And they got on to St. Lawrence Island, and in a single day, everything warmed up so much that there was too much water
To get
for
back.
them to be able to get back. So they were stuck on the island with all this deer, which was not a bad thing. It's a pretty nice island, lots of berries and stuff. And all these deer, it's not too bad, right? They've had that condition a few times in the course of their occupation at St. Lawrence Island. And so the deer would sometimes make it to the mainland. And they were casually herded for the purposes of subsistence. But there was no effort to really try to manage them in any way. And so we suggested that there might actually be a benefit here of trying to manage the herd. And so we did. And we wrote that plan that got put together, and there is a managed herd now that is actually generating income and providing commercial deer meat as well as subsistence uses. When there are external events that cause opportunity to occur. For example, when the nuclear plant went Tango uniform in Europe.
Chernobyl.
Thank you. It affected a number of sources of biological products that we had. For an example is we would find cones underneath the white spruce. And white spruce cone has a very similar rosette shape as a cone that is used in European, that is sourced from Europe by Claire Burke products. Claire Burke makes, what do you call it, smelly stuff? This
Potpourri.
Potpourri. They make commercial potpourri. I mean, tons of this shit. And we were able to do a study that showed a similar effect because it had to soak up the smelly good stuff and be able to retain it within its fiber structure for a certain period of time. And you are able to measure intensity and time and do various metrics. So we hired somebody who knew how to do that, had them compare a sample of European cone that we had gotten with our white spruce cone, and we were able to establish a market for our white spruce cone to substitute for 3 years the European cone.
Because they weren't able to use the European cones because they were coming from Ukraine where they were exposed to radiation. And so it couldn't be used. Yeah.
Exactly. Oh, salmon. We were among the first to experiment with salmon skin, turning that into a leather. And, oh, gee whiz. St. Lawrence Island. I would put this down as a partly successful project we discovered that they had access to birds, that the bird watchers, the Linnaean Society, loved that area, that geospace. And so our folks were able to market their space, and we had training on how to do customer servicing, call it.
So for like tourism, so that people would go there for bird watchers. Bird watchers from around the world will travel there for specific types of birds.
That's exactly it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you got it. Nice summary. We had a little hiccup, though. One of our esteemed elders was in a boat with a group of bird watchers. There was this orange-breasted aquatic bird floating around in the water, and the two bird watchers were looking through their glasses and were getting into an argument about what it was. And one said, no, it's a greater. The other one said it's a lesser. So the elder, wanting to satisfy the customer, shot the bird and then went over and got it, threw it in the boat and said, there, what is it, greater or lesser? And they were horrified. But he attempted to overachieve customer satisfaction. That's how I reported that one. But they did retain some repeat customers and came back. So anyway, we worked the heck out of St. Lawrence.
Hey, how did you and Harriet meet? How did y'all get together?
Oh, God. When I moved to Anchorage, I'm a very political guy. I followed the news, and I said, who is this warrior woman?
When did you move to Anchorage?
Moved to Anchorage in 1992.
Got it.
93. And was getting settled. Took a while to get settled. My marriage was falling apart, various reasons. And anyway, by then I was on my own. And there was this woman who was fighting in the school district, Gay Straight Alliances, and was getting a whole lot of shit from the right-wingers. And so I went to observe her on occasion and listen to her on, they would quote her on the news, and I'm going to have to meet this woman. And so I went to her house. I've never been shy about that, and knocked on the door. One of the kids answered the door, took me up to where she had her office, and there she was. She turned around, and I said, hi, my name's Elstun. I'm a fan of yours. I said, I'd like to help, volunteer, go door to door or whatever. And so she said, okay, well, I'm going to go door to door tonight. Would you like to go with me? I said, oh, yeah.
Is it running for school board then?
Well, I think she was running for assembly.
Okay.
Against Gavin Sullivan. Yeah. So I was there. I didn't care what she was running for. I wanted to help her win.
And you've been very involved in politics your whole life.
I have.
Coming more to the present day, what's your take on politics in America and Alaska today?
Well, we're in a bizarre interlude that's about to end. And I feel very lucky that I've had a chance to live through this moment in history. And I've been able to reaffirm all of my values, strengthen all of my values, actually, as a result of this period. And for that, I'm grateful. I'm feeling very positive about 2026. I think this is going to be a very, very good year. And I want people to understand that. Don't lose hope. Do not lose hope. So anyway, there we are.
Elstun Lauesen, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Oh, well, good Lord. Thank you for making the time.
Thank you, listeners. If you like what you heard, please subscribe, rate, and review us. To contact me, email rep.andrew.gray@aklec.gov or call 907-269-0123.